This is Twit.
You wrote, understanding patents offers a window not just into the labyrinthine world of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and its potential failings, but also into how companies think about the future. So let's start there. Can you explain why patents are sort of a glimpse into a company's psyche?
Sure. So, companies file patents for things even if they're not sure they're going to use them. Patents get filed really early in the process just in case. And so often they aren't necessarily a reflection of what the company is making day to day, but instead sort of the problems that they're thinking about and some of the solutions they might be considering using to solve those problems. And so it's really more, I think, a glimpse into kind of like, what are the big questions that they're coming to their engineers and saying, like, we got to figure this out. Let's brainstorm, let's figure out what to do. And so you see these patents, and some of them seem kind of weird, some of them seem kind of funny. People love to make fun of patents, like you said. There's so many articles, and it's sort of a pet peeve of mine where like tech reporters will be like, Facebook is doing this thing. And if you look at it, Facebook's not actually doing that thing. They simply filed a patent that like maybe kind of talks about that thing. But it is a good way to kind of see what Facebook is worrying about or what Amazon is worrying about or Sony or whatever company you want to look at.
Yeah. So going on with that, we talk a lot about media literacy as a whole and how important that is. And I was hoping, one of the things you mentioned is that claims are the most important part of a patent. So for the listeners out there, and for me as well, could you give us some tips on sort of patent literacy? What should we be looking for if we want to go past the headline and understand how to sort of break apart a patent?
Sure. I should caveat this by saying that I am not a lawyer. So if you have real patent law questions, you should absolutely consult a lawyer. But, I think that the thing that people love to jump on top of with patents is the pictures. And I too, they're great. They're delightful. But the pictures don't really matter that much in terms of what the patent is actually saying. The thing that matters is the claims. And the claims are the thing that the patent is saying, this is the thing that's original. This is the thing that doesn't exist in the world. And that I am kind of giving to the U.S. Patent Office in order to get protection back, right? So the whole deal with patents is that you tell the world how this great invention that you've come up with works. And you share that information with the United States, with the world, and that's great for everybody. And then the U.S. in return gives you protection on that patent for 20 years of the term, assuming you maintain the patent through its life. And so, that is the claims are what you are saying, like, this is the actual invention. This is the actual thing that I have come up with. Everything else is kind of trappings to that. And they can be important. And, the other things that are in the patent are useful information. But if you really want to know what a patent is about and what they are actually kind of saying that they have invented, the claims are the thing that you want to read. Now, like any technical document, there are pieces of jargon and there are weird ins and outs of claims. In the piece for Slate, I talked a little bit about prophetic examples.
Yes.
So you can actually sort of make things up in a patent that you don't have to necessarily have done the experiments. You can just say like, this experiment shows blank thing, that this totally works, the thing that I've invented. And that can be untrue. So there are weird things about patents, and it's not your fault if you get confused reading a patent, if you're just like a regular person like you or me. But if you do really want to kind of dive in, if you see a tech headline or you read something and you're like, that sounds weird, the place to go is the claims.
So what kind of struck me in reading through the piece, I thought it was fascinating because, so many, on the shows that I do here, that we do here, that I'm definitely totally guilty of like, oh my goodness, they're working on that patent, because it's just so easy to get entranced by it because they're usually very creative and often they are very different from what we're used to seeing, or maybe they're an extension of what we're used to seeing, almost to like a ridiculous point. And so it's very easy to want to get excited about that. But if they so easily stifle innovation, like if they are truly just, we run a company and we want to file all these patents to make sure that the other people don't do these things, we have no intention of doing them, it just seems like so much of the innovation around these ideas ends up just kind of falling flat because they're using it as weapons instead of using them as real ideas to become something someday. What do you think about that? Like, is that unfair? I mean, it feels unfair to me that no one would be able to tap into that.
I think this is a huge debate among like the patent world and especially the tech patent world. And in different realms, I think the answer is slightly different, right? So you have technology patents, you have software patents, you have things like pharmaceutical patents and biotechnology patents, and it's a little bit different in each place. I think that, in theory, that it's not necessarily fair to say to a company, you can only patent things that you know you're going to use. Because most companies are patenting things long before they might wind up using them. And that's fine. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that because like anything, you have a big problem to solve, right? Let's say you're Amazon and you really need to figure out like, how do we get all the stuff that we have to all the people who want it, right? That's a huge logistical supply chain problem. And there are going to be a ton of possible solutions here. And which solution is the right one kind of depends on what happens with lots of other things that you maybe don't have control over, like infrastructure and the economy and all of that stuff. So it makes sense to maybe go after a couple of different solutions that might be the one that you want to use. And I don't think it necessarily makes sense to say like, no, you can't do that. You can only patent something when you have officially decided that you want to use it. Because that kind of, defeats the purpose, especially even for like a small, let's say you're not Amazon. Let's say you're just you or me and you come up with a genius invention. If you don't have the funds or the resources necessarily to prove that it works yet, but in your heart of hearts that it will, I don't think that it necessarily makes sense for the patent office, for the government to say like, no, you can't use it. You cannot patent that. That said, obviously, there's the flip side, right? There are what people call patent trolls. There are people who weaponize these intellectual property documents and go after people for infringing on patents that maybe are too broad or maybe shouldn't have been, implemented in the first place. So it is a balancing act. And I think it's really hard, right? Because the whole premise of the patent office is to protect inventors, right? To say like, in the old school kind of like, American way of like, you're in your garage and you've invented something and we're going to protect you and we're going to protect that invention. And that's important. And I think that's really great. The question then becomes like, how do we make sure that that piece of it is protected without kind of like getting overzealous and telling people they can't do certain things? It's really hard to balance those two things. I am glad that I don't have to make policy around this.
Yeah, no kidding.